it's Professor Kettler. I'm going to go ahead and go over your Milestone 1 assignment to help you out because this milestone can be a little confusing on certain parts of it. And I want to make sure that you're successful and that you're able to find everything that you need to find so that way you start off on the right foot. So the first thing is that you're going to want to go to Module 3 and scroll to, after you've reviewed the resources and things like that, you'll go to this part right here. And you are given two documents. You're given a Word document that you can edit, and you're given a rubric. So we're going to kind of look at the rubric first. And what you can see here is you're talking about an environmental issue, which was, you already covered that in week 1 whenever you did your journal, but you may decide to change your article, or sorry, not your article, your environmental issue, depending on the feedback that I gave you. And then you're going to talk about the impact of that environmental issue on the local community. And then you're going to go into some ecological processes. Now, you do need to make sure that you're including citations in your paper, and I'm going to show you what that looks like and give you examples so that way you're aware of what to do. Now, as far as, oops, sorry about that. As far as the document, this is to help you. I'm going to go ahead and share or show you the Word document. Okay. And then my little cursor needs to come back. So this is the document that you can edit and put your information in. You don't have to use that, but I recommend it because it's already kind of outlined for you, and that way you don't forget anything. Now, this thing says you don't need to provide long answers. You can write 3 to 4 sentences. I don't know if I agree with that because with some of these, it may not be able to be written in that short amount without kind of sacrificing the quality of the assignment. And I want you to earn exemplary on this. And this is going to be all put into your final paper at the end of the course. So the more work you put into it now, the less work you're going to have to do on that final paper. And that final paper can be really overwhelming for a lot of students. So I always recommend that you put forth your best effort on these milestone assignments so that when you get to the end, you're kind of just copying and pasting and you don't have to worry about updating anything. So when you go to this, you're going to put in what your environmental issue is right here. So in my instructor example, I'm using oil spills. And then you are identifying the environmental issue and you're describing its impacts on a global level. So how, essentially, how do oil spills affect things on a global level? Then you're describing the impact of that environmental issue on your local community. So the issue that you choose should be something that you're encountering on a daily basis. And then you get to part 2, which is ecological processes. And this is the most missed part of this assignment and seems to plague students with Milestone 3 and Milestone 5 because it'll appear again. So it's very important that you kind of pay attention to this lesson that I'm about to give on this. So that way you're able to do your best work. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of this and go to the PowerPoint that I made. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and view this slideshow. All right, so here's Milestone 1. So like I said, part 1, you're identifying a local environmental issue, you're describing its impact on a global level and what human activities cause the problem. So here is a picture taken from the announcements where I give you a list of environmental issues that you could choose from and kind of how you should do it. So for instance, I have a lot of students who pick water pollution. However, they're not focused with it and they're just kind of doing water pollution in general. And they're just saying, yeah, my water in my community is polluted, but they don't say what it's polluted with, how this is affecting things on a global level. So you need to be very focused when you do this. Same thing with air pollution. You want to identify the specific air pollutant and not just a general statement of my, city has a lot of air pollution. So, okay, great. What does that entail? Is that ozone? Is that, particulate matter? Like what's going on? Climate change is also a really big one that a lot of people pick. And I understand why they pick it, because climate change is affecting almost every city and area around the world. But you need to be specific about what you're focused on. So like, for instance, if you live in Colorado, you may want to talk about how climate change is causing more droughts or more wildfires, versus if you live on the coast, you can talk about, increased flooding or sea level rise, hurricanes, things like that. The important thing though, is to pick just one. Don't try to do all of them. Don't say climate change is causing, these 4 things in my community. That's going to be really overwhelming and not good for your topic. Just choose one. I know that's hard, but it'll make it easier for you in the long run. Sometimes people focus on species extinction. Make sure you're only focusing on one species. So like, tigers versus, something else, instead of trying to say, yeah, these 10 species are going extinct. Deforestation is another kind of popular one. You can choose other issues other than what is listed here. This is just to give you an example in case you're having trouble coming up with something. Okay, so here is my instructor example. So here's how I would fill out that template that I showed you. So I say a local oil spill that is causing harm to the salmon population. So that's my environmental issue. This local issue has now become a global issue because the loss of a species will cause a trophic cascade that negatively impacts all other organisms in that ecosystem. In addition, there are thousands of oil spills that occur around the world each year that pollute our land and drinking water. And I give a citation for that. So remember what I said, that your paper needs citations. This is how you do it. So you have a reference, right, where this is where I got that information. So I'm supporting a claim that I'm making. So the claim that I'm making is that there's thousands of oil spills that occur around the world each year that pollute our land and drinking water. Because that's such a bold claim, I need to support that with a resource. And then I go on to talk about the human activity that caused the problem. So you're talking about what your issue is. You're talking about why it's a global issue. Then you're talking about the human activity that caused that problem. So if you were to, you would basically just take that information right here and put it in that first section of your document, that paper that was provided to you. The references, you can either put the reference underneath your paragraph like I did here, or you could list them at the bottom, at the very, very bottom of your paper. It's up to you and what you want to do, but they are required. You do need them, okay? All right, part 2 is it's asking you to describe the impact of this issue on your local community. This may include impacts on local ecology or on local human activities. Support your description with specific examples from where you reside. Okay, so I'm talking about how, the local impact is that the salmon fisheries are going to collapse. There's going to be a loss of jobs for the fishermen, and it's going to have a potential to cause a really large economic loss for the community. Then I'm giving an example of how this has previously occurred. Whenever in 2010, there was a really big oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico from BP, and it caused shrimp populations to collapse, and the economy along the Gulf Coast lost billions of dollars. And then tourism was also affected, and many stores went out of businesses. So I've described the impact on the local community and how it has harmed the ecology of that area and human activities. And I've given examples, okay? So the next one is part 2. The ecological processes. This is the most missed section of the Milestone project, of this project, and Milestone 3 and Milestone 5, okay? I'm not sure where the disconnect here is, but there seems to be a large disconnect with students. probably because you don't really think about these ecological processes. They just kind of happen around you. So it's really important that you pay attention to this next part. For your milestone, you have to identify 2 ecological processes that are impacted by your environmental issue and describe how each process has been impacted by that issue. And you have to support your description. So what are the 4 ecological processes? They are the water cycle, biogeochemical cycles, also called nutrient cycling, energy flow in an ecosystem, and community dynamics. Okay, so that's the 4. You only need to pick 2, okay? So let's say the water cycle. Now, this is not appropriate for all topics, okay? But if you have a topic that is about water pollution or droughts or chemicals being dumped in your local area, or fertilizers running off, or non-point source and point source pollution, so like nutrient pollution, any kind of plastics in the water cycle, you will want to talk about the water cycle, okay? And you're basically just talking about how it's being impacted. So for instance, let's say your topic is about how fertilizer on the land is getting into the ocean, okay? So you would just discuss, you would say the water cycle is being impacted because fertilizers are on the land and they are running off into the ocean, and as they run off, they are creating pollution for local people and animals whenever they drink that water. Then when it gets to the ocean, it impacts that system because now it's causing algae blooms and causing anoxic conditions in the ocean. Okay, so that would be one thing you could say. Okay, like I said, the water cycle is not appropriate for all topics, but it can be used for any of these topics that are listed here. All right, next ecological process, the carbon cycle. You will want to do the carbon cycle if you have a climate change topic. If you have anything about emissions, for like carbon emissions, so like methane emissions, CO2, any kind of air pollution is most likely involving the carbon cycle. Any kind of plastic pollution, because plastic is made by burning fossil fuels. And so you would talk about how carbon is being released into the atmosphere. It's causing a thickening of the atmosphere and causing the planet to warm. You could also be talking about ocean acidification, because carbon diffuses into the ocean and creates problems for the marine wildlife. You're kind of having to relate this back to your local area as well. So if you are not living next to the ocean, you don't want to talk about ocean acidification because that's not in your area. Instead, you want to talk about, might be impacting the carbon cycle in your local area by increasing, emissions and heat and things like that from the atmosphere. All right, the next type of cycle is nitrogen and phosphorus cycles. So these are separate, okay? So you don't have to, if you choose to do biogeochemical cycling, you don't have to talk about carbon, phosphorus, nitrogen. No, just one is fine. Yeah. So this ecological process is appropriate for anybody who's doing anything about fertilizers, like fertilizer problems in their local community, any kind of sewage problems in their local community. If there's concentrated animal feeding lots, so agricultural issues in your community, if there's dead zones or algae blooms, water pollution is appropriate here too. Most of the time, nitrogen and phosphorus is coming from fertilizers and pesticides and chemicals that are being spread on the land. And most of the time it's being caused by agriculture, okay, because they're using it to fertilize their crops. And unfortunately, when it rains, it goes into the local waterways and finds its way to the ocean. Now, they could be dumping it as well. So like in this picture you see here, like if there's local mines, like if mining is going on, a lot of times it can leave the mines, or there might be open pits that cause this these nutrients to get into the water source and create problems. And so like you see down here in this picture, it's kind of showing you like how animal waste could be running off into the water. And what happens is that these actually cause a nitrogen bloom or an algae bloom or, phosphorus to be high levels in the water. And this can cause environmental harm and health problems to humans and animals alike. All right. The third type of ecological process is energy flow. Now, all topics affect the energy flow of a system. I don't care what topic you have, you can choose energy flow as part of your ecological process, because any kind of environmental problem affects how energy flows through that system. And essentially what energy flow is how matter is cycled through that ecosystem. Most of the time, it kind of starts at the bottom with producers, which absorb sunlight and perform photosynthesis, and then they pass that energy up the food pyramid. Only about 10% of that energy is passed up because most of it is lost as heat. And so what ends up happening is let's say you have something that is taking out one level of this energy pyramid. So let's say, there's too many wolves, or there's too many top predators. And so what ends up happening is they overconsume the primary consumers. And now, you have an imbalanced pyramid, energy pyramid, and there might be too many producers. Or let's say you have the opposite, and the producers are being overgrazed. And so now you don't have enough food for the consumers. And so, these other animals are going to die. So that's called a trophic cascade. It's basically an imbalance in the energy pyramid. Climate change affects the energy flow of material as well, because as we heat up the earth, we're causing stress to the various ecosystems. And when we do that, we're causing, different species extinction, or materials aren't readily available to the organisms in that ecosystem. And so the energy flow is impacted. It's messed up to where there's not a balance, because you want your energy pyramid to look like this, where you have more producers than consumers. But if something happens and, these get wiped out and now there's more consumers, that's a problem, okay? Because animals can't find food, and then humans can't find the resources that they need as well. All right, the last ecological process is called community dynamics. And this is basically changes in an ecosystem over time. So this is going to be really appropriate for anybody who chooses invasive species as their topic, lack of biodiversity in their area, any kind of environmental pollution that changes the ecosystem, and climate change. So climate change is very, very versatile in what ecological process you can talk about. So what I've kind of shown you here is a feeding relationship. And so you can see, right, like you have animals that are consuming each other, right? So this mouse is consuming the acorn, the snake consumes the mouse, and then the bird consumes the snake. And so what can happen is, let's say you have an invasive species that comes in and now there's no more acorns. So what is that mouse going to eat, right? And if the mouse population collapses, what is that snake going to eat? Same thing with biodiversity. If you don't have a lot of biodiversity, so let's say you only have one species of snake, then if an illness comes along, it can wipe out that whole entire snake population, and you don't have any other animals to help with that biodiversity in this area. So it becomes stagnant. And then as far as environmental pollution, so let's say their water source is contaminated or their air is contaminated. That can also cause a trophic cascade because they can't find clean water or they're not breathing in clean air. And then climate change can affect the community dynamics by heating up this area so much that these animals either have to migrate or adapt. And if they can't adapt fast enough, then they die out. All right, so here's my instructor example. So this is what I would put in my milestone paper, right? So I've decided I'm going to talk about the water cycle because it's an oil spill in the area and in the fisheries, the nutrient cycling, and the community dynamics. You don't have to do 3, you can do 2. And so essentially what I do is I just talk about, how it's being affected. So I say the oil spill causes water pollution and contamination of the ocean. The water can no longer be used to support healthy marine organisms and has the potential to affect freshwater sources. if the contaminants spread into the groundwater. Okay, so I made a pretty bold claim there. I'm saying that, you know, the water can't support anything and can affect freshwater sources. So I need a source to support that. And I've given that here, this reference. Okay, I'm going to show you what that looks like whenever you do your references. So then nutrient cycling, I talk about how they can create algae blooms that increase dead zones. The large algae bloom uses up the dissolved oxygen in the water and can create large anoxic areas that cannot sustain oxygen breathing organisms. So that's a bold claim. So I need a citation there. So what you can do is you can go back to my screen here. And I have a source to support this from the EPA talking about the harmful, you know, dead zones caused by algae blooms. So what I can do is I can take this website and I can copy it. And then I go to this other website called Scribbr, so SCRIBBR.com. And when I go there, I can actually click on this button, okay, because I have a website, and I paste the website in. I tell it to search for that website, click on it, and it automatically populates everything that I need. Now I do need to go, it doesn't have an author listed here, so I can go look and see if there is an author who published this. Sometimes it's at the bottom, doesn't look like it. So instead I'm going to say, okay, it's an organization, and I would write, you know, Environmental Protection Agency. So that's the author. And then see, it has populated the publication date. Okay, and then the name of the website is the US EPA. And then I just hit cite source. And so right there, now I have my citation. I can click on it to copy. So now I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint to kind of show you how you would do this citation. Okay. Oh, sorry, I messed that up a little bit. Apologize. Okay, there we go. So I have my reference copied. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste, right, my Environmental Protection Agency. And so what you do to do the in-text citation is you typically do the author's last name and then the date that it was published. So that's kind of what I have right here. But because this is a organization, I would just say EPA, comma, it was published in 2022. So I do 2022. Okay, and there's my citation. So that's how you can do citations as well. Once again, if you want to list your references with the example, that's totally fine. Or you can take all of your references and list them at the bottom of your paper. So for instance, you know, I would just copy, and then you could write like, here's your paper, and then there's all my references. I would separate them out if I were you, so that way you can readily see them. But yeah, so for this, right? So I would take my, and you don't have to make a PowerPoint. This is just to kind of show you how you would fill this paper out, right? So you would put it in there, and there's your information that you need. So I hope that this has been helpful. And if you need any further help, just reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to help you out with any questions you have about the ecological processes or what you should be putting into this paper. So let me know, and I look forward to reading all of your Milestone 1 projects.